Morning, guys. Welcome to another episode of OHS Made Easy. Thank you for joining me for this episode again. We're doing episode six of OHS Made Easy, where we just discuss and learn from each other on issues to do with occupational health and safety. Today I decided not to do slides and take screenshots and paste them onto a slideshow, but I've decided to go through the act verbatimly. Verbatimly simply means word for word in the OHS Act. That's what I've decided to do. And today we just want to talk about, in episode 6, the concept of exemptions. I want to talk about exemptions. Now, quick one, just like I always say, I just don't want to take long. I don't want to be more than 10 minutes. Just want to be quick, short, and straight to the point. Now, as a health and safety officer, health and safety practitioner, health and safety specialist, you would understand that in the event that you do not comply with the requirements of health and safety, there is Section 38, which I've just highlighted there, which talks about offenses, penalties, and special orders of the court. And Section 38, colleagues, is very, very clear that if anyone fails to comply, it says any person there, if any person, or later on says any organization, if any organization fails to comply with the requirements of the Act from Section 7, which talks of the safety policy, Section 8, which talks of duties of employers, Section 9, which talks of duties of employers to non-employees, Section 10, duties of manufacturers, Section 13, duty to inform, 14, duties of employees, 15, you know all these things, you know the Act by heart by now. Now, the Health and Safety Act says if anyone fails to comply with these sections of the Act, you'll be liable, you know this, to a fine not exceeding 50,000 rands or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year. Or it also says to employers, if ever an incident happens which can be equated to culpable homicide, the employer will be liable to a fine not exceeding 100,000 rands or imprisonment not exceeding 2 years. Now, those are the fines and penalties of failure to comply with the OHS Act. In other circles, we call it legal liability. In fact, in our circles, we call it legal liability, whereby if we fail to comply to the legal prescripts, if we fail to comply to the legal requirements, there is liability. And that is Section 38. You'll be liable. Now, today's episode, I'm simply saying, guys, if ever there's a situation which is causing you and your organization not to comply with the Occupational Health and Safety Act, instead of being exposed to legal liability, one of the ways, to go around it is Section 40, which is exemptions. Section 40. That's your way out. That's your gateway. If ever you guys have got, maybe are supposed to have safety committee meetings once every 3 months, but for whatever reason, maybe the work is too much, the workload is too much, or your branches are few and far apart, and it's difficult for them to come through for the safety committee. And when Section 20 and Section 19 speak about you doing safety committee meetings every 3 months, at least every 3 months, but you cannot do it. Instead of you breaking the law and being exposed to the fines and penalties I've just told you about in Section 38, you can go to the Department of Employment and Labor and you can request an exemption. An exemption, you are just simply saying, please allow me not to comply with this section of the Act. Please allow me not to comply with these sections of the Act. Or, here's a crazy one. You can go to the Department of Labor and actually ask, guys, we do not want to comply with the OHS Act totally. And they can allow you. That's what exemptions are. Exemptions is license to break the law being given by the lawmaker. The lawmaker is Department of Employment and Labor. And they are the only ones who allow you and permit you and give you permission to break the law. Without that, Section 38 will always kick in and you might be exposed to fines and penalties. So if for whatever reason in your organization you are not able to comply with the Health and Safety Act and regulations, go to Department of Labor, tell them about your situation, and they'll grant you an exemption. Let's read a few things. The Act here says the minister, so the person who grants the exemption is the minister. It says the minister, for such a period under such conditions as may be determined by him, may exempt an employer or user or any category of employers or users generally or with respect to any particular employee or category of employees. A lot of words there, but I want you to get this. The minister may, for such a period or for such a time, the minister may exempt any employer, so that it makes sense, from any or all provisions of the Act. Read the highlighted stuff, because the rest can be a bit tricky for you and I. We are not lawyers, we are OHS practitioners, but this is the gist of it. The stuff I highlighted. The minister may exempt any employer or user, which is you guys. The minister may exempt any employer or user from any or all the provisions of this Act. So the minister can grant you an exemption and say, no problem, your organization, all right, I understand, you don't have to comply with this section of the law, we'll give you the exemption. Or no problem, I understand, you are supposed to do monthly audits on your contractors, but there are 800 of them on site. You can't do audits monthly as per construction regulations. Go and get an exemption. They'll give you permission maybe to do the audits once every 3 months. Or maybe you are building a very, very critical site and there's no time to do health and safety committee meetings. You can get an exemption for that. A few years ago, where I was working, while I was still a senior safety officer for one of the plastic manufacturing companies in Wadeville, Germiston, we had a warehouse, and this warehouse were packing pallets too high, meaning one pallet on top of the other. But we could not afford to go and hire extra warehousing. So I made an application to the Department of Labor and requested and said, Labor, under the general safety regulations and general safety regulations concerning stacking and packing, we are not allowed to pack 3 pallets on top of each other. 3 pallets on top of each other. Our warehouse only allows us to pack 2 pallets, 1 pallet on top of the other, but we need to pack 3 high, because we do not have the money to go and hire new warehouse space. And Labor came to our premises. We showed them what we'll do, how we'll pack. We showed them how we'll demarcate, how we'll cordon off certain areas, how we'll make sure that pedestrians don't go to that area where we're staking 3 high, how we'll make sure that only forklifts go there. So if the pallet falls, it will fall on a forklift and they are covered and there'll be no pedestrians there. And we showed them, as far as is reasonably practicable, how we are able to pack 3 high. And guess what? They granted us an exemption. So the minister can give you an exemption. The Department of Labor can allow you to break the law. So as a safety officer, this is my point. While you are working wherever you're working, in fact, there are 2 points. The 1 point is for the safety officer who's working. Any area where you feel that you guys cannot comply with as an organization, tell your boss and say, boss, as a safety practitioner, this is what I want to do. I want us to get an exemption so that we don't get into trouble. We are just going to request, try it. Let's go and ask. That's number 1. But here's a cool one. As this will get me a job all the time. When I go for an interview, you see, when it comes to interviews, I always say that the mistake that a company can do is to call me for an interview. Once they call me for an interview, then it's done. The job is mine. That was my attitude. And that's the reason for OHS Made Me Easy. Guys, I want to teach you health and safety, learn from you, learn from each other, to such a level that if any company calls you for an interview, it's a done deal. The job is yours. Because I would have taught you the things to do, to say, and there's nothing which they'll ask you in an interview. I can tell you this without a shadow of doubt. If you keep on following what I'm posting under OHS Made Easy, there is no job in South Africa or any other place which you attend an interview for and not get. It's impossible. Unless you're attending with someone else who is who is also following OHS Made Easy, because I'll share with you, like I'm going to share with you right now, this principle. So during interviews, they'll ask different things. And one of the things they'll ask is, yeah, so if ever your boss is saying do 1, 2, 3, and they're asking you to break the law, what will you do? And one of the things is I'll handle my boss probably, but in the process, I'll get an exemption. And more often than not, the interviewers don't know what an exemption is or how it's gotten. And it always what interests them that, oh, there's actually a way around these things. I've often seen in our different WhatsApp groups where people are crying, guys, my manager, my supervisor doesn't want to comply, doesn't want to do 1, 2, 3. Yes, you have to deal with them. But if you are employed and they are continuously doing that, one of the ways you can go about it is to get an exemption and try to tell labor that, listen, there is no way our company is going to comply, and we need you to grant us an exemption, and the act allows for that. So in an interview, if they ask you, so what are you going to do? How are you going to add value to our organization? And you are going to say, that's a good answer. Here's an answer. I'm going to say, because I'm a health and safety expert, and because I know the prescripts of the law, I know the requirements of the regulations, I am going to ensure that as much as possible, we comply with the act. But in areas where there's a conflict of interest between the profitability of the organization and health and safety compliance, I will assist the organization in getting an exemption so that we are still able to be profitable while we are still on the right side of the law. If you give them such an answer, now that shows your skill. That shows that you know. That shows that you are a good health and safety practitioner who knows their job. So that's what we're talking about, colleagues here. The minister can grant you an exemption from any or all the provisions of the act. All the provisions of the act. The minister, if you put your case forward properly, they can actually give you allowance for a year and say that, no, we allow you not to comply to the act for a year. You guys do the best you can, do your production, do your construction, and that's what exemptions are for. And that's what I wanted to highlight to you there. Let's see a few things. Right. The period for which the exemption may be granted under may commence in a date earlier, but not in a date after. So what the act is simply saying there, that you can submit an application for an exemption. Let's say you submitted on the 20th of March, 2024, but the exemption was only granted when you submitted the application 24 March 2024, but the exemption was only granted maybe in June. So they are able to backdate the exemption to the application date. So that maybe in May, there was an inspection or there was an incident that happened while the exemption was still applied, they'll backdate it, and the exemption will cover the period when that incident happened so that there is no legal liability. That's what the act is saying there. Right. So when they are granting an exemption, they'll give you a certificate of exemption, which has got the name of the organization, the scope which the exemption covers, that is, what is the exemption covering, and the period, that is for how many months, for how many years, and the conditions which are associated with that exemption. So that's what an exemption is all about. What I'm saying here, guys, is as a safety officer, do not just break the law. Do not allow your organization to break the law willy-nilly, but there is a way out, and that is granted under Section 40 of the Act, and that is get an exemption. Hope that makes sense. Hope that is good. Guys, please feel free to get in touch with me when it comes to all issues health and safety. Give me a shout if you need first aid training, firefighting training, safety file training, safety audits, anything to do with health and safety. I'm your guy. Give me a shout and I'll help you to the best of my ability. And we can even do trainings on weekends so that you are not going to be, you won't take a day off from work or stop doing your weekly duties. We can allow for trainings to be done after hours as well. Just we are quite flexible and we are accredited. We're an accredited training provider. Just give me a shout. If you're doing a safety file and you get stuck, give me a shout. I'll help as best as I can. Let's do partnerships. Let's do joint ventures. Let's work. We have to work and help each other do well. Otherwise, I'll keep on posting and keep on educating you as I learn from you. Please, 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 please like, subscribe, comment, share this episode with others in different Facebook groups, in different WhatsApp groups you're involved in, and let's help each other grow and support me as I support you. Thank you very much, guys. Hope this makes sense. Keep well and bye-bye.